Nintendo is a company that always puts a focus on fun. Whether it's making video games or even just toys and accessories, they always try to find some way to incorporate fun into things that might seem mundane at first glance. Using a vacuum cleaner, cleaning up other people's mess, improving your weight and balance, literally folding cardboard, monitoring your sleep activity. Oh, yeah, well, they can't all be winners. One of the more staple examples of Nintendo turning a basic idea into a fun little experience is the camera. A lot of Nintendo systems have toyed around with the simple concept of cameras. You have the first built-in camera on the DSi, the ones on the 3DS that could take 3D photos, the one on the Wii U that I'm not sure anyone else used, and the one on the Switch that's still technically a camera. Each one of them has different unique functions, whether it's augmented reality or virtual sandwich eating, and they've pretty much become classic Nintendo gimmicks. Even on the Wii, which didn't have a camera, they included a photo channel, so you could put in SD cards with your favorite photos on them just to draw on them or turn them into 192-piece puzzles. Has anyone ever solved these? I could make a whole other video just to talk about the cameras on all of the Nintendo systems, but today I want to focus on just one, the grandfather of all Nintendo cameras, the Game Boy camera.
When it's least expected, you're elected, you're the star today. Smile, you're on Game Boy camera. It's fun to look at yourself as other people do. How's your sense of humor? There's a rumor, laughter's on its way. Smile, you're on Game Boy camera.
Yes, with Game Boy camera, you can turn photography into Funtography.
Smile, you're on Game Boy camera.
Now I know what you're probably thinking. Yeah, I've heard of that, it's just a crappy camera for the Game Boy that took potato quality pictures in 4 shades of grey. But I think it would be cool to go even deeper, to see the surprisingly deep entertainment value you could have gotten from a simple camera made by Nintendo in 1998. To start off, it actually wasn't that simple. At the time of its release, the Game Boy camera was the world's smallest digital camera. I guess a small camera resolution really helped Nintendo achieve that. The appearance of the Game Boy camera should be familiar to most of you. It's basically a Game Boy cartridge with a small camera strapped on top which you can turn 180 degrees. You plug it in your Game Boy and the first thing you'll notice is that the software was developed by creatures in Game Freak. Yup, when they're not working on Pokemon, they've always made some really weird games, and that actually still holds true to this day. Let's undergo our obligatory viewing of the dancing Mario and arrive at the menu screen. Looks simple enough, right? Take photos, view them, and play games with them. Well, let's start from the top. Shoot, contrary to popular belief, does not give you the option to literally shoot a little boy or princess in an RPG interface, but instead gives you different options for shooting photos. And I'm sure most of you already know that the Game Boy camera doesn't have the greatest picture quality. Yeah. This direct footage is taken from an emulator using my computer's webcam, but still the resulting image is a mere 128 by 112 pixels using the limited 4 shades of grey. However, the images aren't really an incomprehensible mess of pixels. Under good lighting conditions and using the D-pad to toggle the brightness and contrast accordingly, you can actually get some decent photos with it. Sure, they're not in glorious high definition, but it has that unique 90s aesthetic that's adored by some people, including me. It's like whatever you capture with this camera suddenly gets transported 20-something years back in time. Of course, brightness and contrast aren't the only things you can change. By pressing select, you get several more options. You can toggle differing, change the shutter sound, flip the image, which comes in really handy if you're using a GBA SP, and you can even modify the color palette. Going back to the menu, check gives you a quick shortcut to scrolling through your camera roll. Items provides you with a self-timer as well as a time-lapse option, which is weird because the Game Boy camera only has enough room to store 28 shots. Which I'd imagine is a bit on the insufficient side for something like a time-lapse, but it's neat to see the option there nonetheless. Magic is where the real magic happens. It offers different ways to change your images, such as the trick lenses that mirror or stretch your images, combining 4 images into one, making a photo montage, and so on. You can even create panorama photos. Very blurry panoramas, but panoramas nonetheless. That's still a very satisfying word to say. Panoramas. There's also the game face option, which lets you take 4 photos of your face that will be used in the various minigames, which we'll touch on later. Finally, we have Run, which does, well, I think everyone knows what it does at this point. Next up, we have the View option. In this unsettling menu, we have two seemingly redundant options, Album and Show, which seemingly appear to be redundant at first glance. Let's check out Show first, which offers 3 options. Slideshow lets us view our pictures as a slideshow, with different options for choosing whether or not to shuffle them, as well as the background music, which is either the Blue Danube Waltz, or just noises. Whatever floats your boat. The Animation option lets us select from 32 different music tracks and play— we can't do anything about that yet, we have to wait a bit, I guess. And Hotspot, which does apparently nothing at the moment. I guess we'll have to come back to that later as well. Well, onto the album then. Similar to the check option from the shooting menu, this lets you view any of the 28 photos you've taken, but with the addition of viewing the special B album, which contains preset patterns and images that you can unlock by fulfilling certain criteria, kind of similar to achievements. The ones linked to getting high scores in the minigames are absolutely ridiculous, trust me. I should also talk about the stuff you can do with your photos as well. Press A and a bunch of options appear. Let's start from the right and go clockwise. Frame lets you change the frame of the photo with a total of 18 different designs. Comment lets you leave a message about the photo so you can preserve your thoughts on the pixelated sandwich you had for lunch or something. Delete is pretty self-explanatory. Paint and Stamp offer different ways to decorate your photos. Drawing on them might be a bit difficult because all you have is a D-pad and buttons, but you do have multiple pen sizes, drawing speeds, and colors to choose from. That's a really generous term right there, Nintendo. You also have stamps of different varieties, from facial features to letters and symbols, and even Nintendo characters. And this is where some of the major differences between the Japanese and American versions of the Game Boy camera reside. Some of the stamps are exclusive to either the Japanese or American version, such as the Mario stamps or a few of the Pokemon stamps. In fact, there was also a special Golden Zelda edition of the Game Boy camera released through the Nintendo Power magazine that contained exclusive Zelda-themed stamps. Man, these must be pretty rare to find nowadays. Actually, there are way more differences between the Japanese and American versions besides the stamps. Almost everything from the menu screens to the unlockable pictures are different between regions. I highly recommend going through the Cutting Room Floors article on the Game Boy camera to see all of them. Back to the last option, which is to print your photos using the special Game Boy printer. Now, I would also love to put some focus on this accessory, but this video is going long enough as it is. Plus, I only have one other game which is compatible with the thing. So I'll save the detailed babbling about this little printer for the future, maybe in a Things of Interest video or something. But to cover the basics, the Game Boy printer, or pocket printer as it was known in Japan, was first and foremost designed to be the companion to the Game Boy camera. It was a battery-powered thermal printer, meaning that it didn't need any ink, just a special type of paper that turns black when heated. And connecting it to the Game Boy camera is as simple as using the link cable. With a simple press of the button, you can print out your photographic masterpieces. Okay, it might not be the best thing ever, but you gotta admit that is super cool. With some new high quality thermal paper, the image quality you get is honestly pretty decent. Imagine going to a meetup during the 90s with your Game Boy that can take and print photos on the go. You've got like the ultimate icebreaker right there. Actually, there's a bit more to the print option. By pressing select, you get to change the printing exposure, as well as changing the photo frame into a wild frame. Basically, it's just a longer picture frame with more elaborate designs. You got some neat little SNES and N64 designs there. Coupled with the built-in B album photos, you can print out pieces of art like this.
Beautiful!
And that about covers it for the view menu, at least for the stuff we can access for now. But before we move on to the minigames, there's still a lot more to see. Press the select button on the main menu and... look at that, more options! Why they're hidden in a menu like this is beyond me, but let's check them out. Doodle is kind of a redundant option here. It's basically a shortcut to the painting and stamping tools that I've already covered. Link, as you can probably infer, lets you link two Game Boys together via the link cable and transfer photos between them. However, once you send a photo on its way, it's gone from your Game Boy camera, which kinda sucks. It probably wouldn't have hurt if it copied the photo instead of moving it entirely. There's also a print option, which, in addition to serving as a shortcut for printing photos, also lets you print out multiple photos at once for the rare occasion that you will want to do such a thing. Now these last two options here are kinda categorized in a weird way, as they both deal with putting your photos together in different ways, which could probably go into the view menu just fine, but I digress. Edit contains two sub-options. Album lets you delete your photos in a quicker fashion, or copy your photos, which in hindsight probably would have been useful for transferring photos without losing them, I guess. And animation lets you put together photos from both the A and B albums into a crude little piece of looping animation. Once you save it, you can then watch it by choosing the animation option in the view menu. Beautiful. Last but not least, you have Special, which gives you another sub-menu.
Oh god, please someone stop this music, please!
Compose lets you merge existing photos together by splitting them or overlaying them, which sorta works, I guess? The low resolution just makes it hard to distinguish anything though. Now Hotspot is a pretty intriguing feature. It lets you place 5 different invisible but clickable spots on a photo. You can then set each spot to play a sound, screen effect, or transition to a different photo. Then you can interact with your hotspots on the view menu. Essentially, this lets you create semi-interactive point-and-click adventures with your Game Boy camera photos. This is a very unique idea, and if not for the limited storage on the Game Boy camera, people probably could have made some elaborate games with it. Phew, now that was a pretty comprehensive look, wasn't it? But we still have one option on the main menu left. It's time to take a look at the minigames. Choose Play and you'll immediately be thrust into Space Fever 2, the sequel to one of Nintendo's earliest arcade titles, Space Fever, which was basically a Space Invaders clone. At the beginning, 2 different spaceships will float down, and shooting them will actually bring you to the other minigames the Game Boy camera has on offer instead. But we're gonna jump into Space Fever 2 first. Instead of a Space Invaders clone like the prequel, this is just your run-of-the-mill top-down shooter. You can only move left and right and alternate between shooting 1 or 2 bullets. Pressing A obviously makes you fire a shot, and pressing B self-destructs your ship. Well, I hope you don't press the wrong button on accident. The gameplay is pretty straightforward, you just shoot the enemies and dodge their attacks. You can even shoot the enemy bullets to destroy them. Staying in the center and just mashing the A button is actually a pretty valid strategy, even though it's not a complete cheese. After a while, you get to face off against the level's boss, which is just a human face. Defeat it and you move on to the next level, with 3 levels in total that just loop. And the boss of the last level is, hey, it's me! This is where the game face we've taken a while back comes into play, and you'll be able to see it used in the other games as well. It may make you look pretty stupid, but hey, that's the point of this whole thing in the first place. Moving on, shooting the spaceship with a B on it at the beginning of Space Fever 2 takes you to Ball, a port? Remake? Whatever, of the original Game & Watch title Ball. The difference being that the player now has a human face. If, for some reason, you've never tried this game before, the general gist is that you move your hands left and right to juggle the balls. If any of them hit the ground, then the game is over, simple as that. You can choose between 2 pieces of background music and 3 different faces, the last of which is your custom game face. By the way, each time you juggle a ball, you get a single point, and to unlock some of the B album pictures, you have to score 500 to 1000 points. I'd imagine that would get really tedious and frustrating real quick. Yes, I spent 8 minutes juggling balls and got nowhere near the required score. You don't have to laugh at me, you prick! The next game isn't really a game per se, it's a DJ music making tool. At the beginning, you can choose to play a sample track or start a new track. There's also only 1 save slot, but don't worry too much about it because all you can do is create a looping track that's 16 beats long. Okay, that might be selling it a bit short. As this ridiculously complex editing screen shows, there's actually quite a few options on display. Basically, you move the cursor to the blank note that you wish to fill in. Then while holding A, choose the note you want to fill with from the piano keys. You have 3 different tracks that can play simultaneously, 2 music tracks and a noise track. And each also contains advanced options such as duty, envelope, and modulation. There's lots of stuff to tweak here to get your musical creation to sound right. I think some professional chiptune artists out there would appreciate this tool, ignoring the fact that it only creates short loops. After that, you can switch to the DJ screen, where you can remix your song by changing the tempo, switching tracks on and off, or adding in sound effects. The 9th and final sound effect literally just plays London bridges falling down note by note. Anyway, after tinkering with it for a small bit, the best I can do with such a short length is this bopping Donkey Kong remix. Now we actually have one last minigame that has to be unlocked by getting a high score of at least 2000 points in Space Fever 2. I guess that A button mashing trick finally comes into play, but once you get that high score, you unlock the final game. Run, run, run. This is a short minigame where you race against a mole and a bird by mashing A as fast as you can and jumping over hurdles by pressing up. It's actually decently challenging and also a great way to torture your thumb. Of course, finishing the race in a certain amount of time is needed to unlock things like B album pictures. Also, when you get first place, you can mash A to raise the flag all the way at the awards ceremony. But it's like, really hard!
Smash the button, smash the button! No!
And after all of that, I think that is the last of what we can do and see on the Game Boy camera. Psych! Pressing the start button and watching that psychedelic trip brings us to the options menu. Truly, I've saved the best for last. You have 4 options here. You can choose your user information and even view your unique user ID. As far as I know, it isn't utilized for anything special, but I could be wrong. You can view records such as the number of photos you've taken, deleted, or transferred, your minigame high scores, and last but not least, the credits. Well, good to know Shigeru Miyamoto single-handedly designed and programmed the entire thing. Look at him dancing and showing off his monumental achievement. Actually, I'm not even completely sure if this guy is Shigeru Miyamoto. Almost everyone on the internet says that it's him, but from what I know, there is no solid conclusive evidence. And with the image quality, we may not know for sure for a good while. To unlock the actual credits, you have to get a score of at least 22 seconds in Run Run Run. And fun fact, the catchy credits tune that you get for your troubles is actually a song from Earthbound Beginnings. And of course, after the credits have rolled, you still get to see Miyamoto dancing. God, this thing is weird and I love it. And with that, that is finally everything that the Game Boy camera has to offer. Well, at least not literally. Even with my long rambling look at its features, there are still plenty of references, regional differences, and Easter eggs hidden throughout the software that I don't have the time to fully detail. And to this day, the Game Boy camera remains quite a popular camera for photography hobbyists. You have people attaching their own lens to the camera, using filters to take color photos like the old days of photography, and even creating special peripherals to save your Game Boy camera photos onto an SD card. My god, those are expensive! The thing is, there's still a pretty active community around the Game Boy camera, and it is still fondly remembered by many, so it's a fascinating case of a weird Nintendo accessory that didn't really fail or fade into obscurity. With its robust features and quirky presentation all fit into a compact Game Boy cartridge, it's pretty much the perfect example of quirky innovation and squeezing the fun out of literally everything. Something that Nintendo still does to this very day.